The Amazon rainforest in Brazil is on fire.
Yeah, and it's burning at a record rate with more than 73,000 wildfires this year.
Sections of the Amazon rainforest are on fire. Tens of thousands of fires have raged in the Amazon this year, 80% more than last year. It's so bad, smoke has reached São Paulo, nearly 3,000 kilometres away.
From space, an area larger than the UK is dotted with hundreds of fires. The Amazon is burning into the night.
It's thought that the fires are being lit on purpose to clear land for farming and for logging. I'm Ruby Jones.
And I'm Stephen Stockwell. And today on The Signal, how the Amazon caught fire and what that means for the rest of us.
Okay. Well, I'm one of those people with a number of titles, but the short title, it's Distinguished Professor Bill Lawrence at James Cook University in Cairns.
Give us the long one too. Go on.
Okay, I'm also an Australian laureate. I hold what's called the Prince Bernhard Chair in International Nature Conservation. I'm a fellow of the Australian Academy of Sciences and the U.S. Academy of Sciences, and I'm a former president of the Association for Tropical Biology and Conservation, which is the world's biggest scientific organization that studies the tropics.
So Bill's been researching the Amazon for 30 years, and he even lived there for 6.
Standing inside the rainforest, it's humid and it's hot and it's windless. The vegetation structure is like this visual cacophony of complexity. I mean, you're surrounded by trees, some of which are well over 1,000 years old, complex vines, epiphytes. And then the diversity of animals and plants is just extraordinary.
So the Amazon is this huge rainforest in South America. It covers more than 5 million square kilometres. It's home to hundreds of billions of trees. And because of the oxygen that they produce, it's actually known as the lungs of the planet.
During the 80s and 90s, things were bad in the Amazon. There was a lot of deforestation. But since 2005, it had actually been improving. And that recovery came about because a 74-year-old missionary called Dorothy Stang was shot and killed.
Some murderous cattle ranchers hunted down and assassinated a Catholic nun. This led to a gigantic public outrage. The president at the time sent in the army. They started cracking down on all the illegal logging and land grabbing. And ever since then, they brought into place some better monitoring systems, and they kind of just cracked down on all the corruption. And as a consequence of that, since that murder in 2006, deforestation rates in the Brazilian Amazon had dropped really dramatically by 75 or 80%. And people were like, wow, this is amazing. Now, in the last less than a year now, this new president, Jair Bolsonaro, who has now been increasingly called the tropical Trump, and he's essentially declared a war on large areas of the Amazon in the interest of just unbridled, aggressive mining, hydro dam, road, and other infrastructure development, which is sort of designed to open up the Amazon like a filleted fish for more development. I think without any qualification, he's across the board the worst environmental president that we have seen in Brazil probably since people were using the word environment.
Okay, so we've got this Brazilian president who was elected last year who's essentially opening up the Amazon for business. How has that led us to the position that we're in today with these large-scale fires?
Well, there's a pretty direct relationship between what's happening because, for instance, a lot of the things that he's promoting are major roads that are opening up, like cutting into huge swaths of rainforest. So those roads themselves that are just crisscrossing the Amazon now are really what's opening it up. And so what we see is when the roads go in, you get a landslide, sort of a Pandora's box of illegal activities, which can include illegal logging, illegal land speculation, fires, poaching. And so there's just this kind of cataclysmic effect, which is oftentimes happening in almost these Wild West frontier areas, which have very low policing and very little enforcement. So, this is not overstating this. I've been talking about the Amazon for a long time, about crises and problems large and small. What we're talking about now is kind of going off the charts. This is not anything that is comparable in living memory, except going back into maybe the 1980s and 1990s and early 2000s, when Brazil was literally completely out of control and was destroying an area of forest the size of Belgium every year.
Okay, so Brazil has this president who is all about development of the Amazon.
Right, and so these roads are being built, giving more people access to the rainforest, and to clear land for development, they're lighting these fires.
They're almost all human lit. So the only fires that would have occurred naturally would be lightning-caused fires, and they would be 1 in 1,000 of those, if that. Typically, the lightning also occurs during major rainstorms. So lightning is not a significant source of fire in the Amazon. Almost all of the fires are lit by humans, and they're being lit all through the deep interior of the Amazon because of these new roads that are slicing into and opening up the Amazon. And they just, once you make that first major cut into a deep forest track, this process has just played out again and again and again.
And what's the scale of the fires that we're seeing now?
So a quick answer would be if we look at this year so far, starting in January 1 up until right now, there's been 85% more fires this year than there was last year in that same period. Okay, so that's January 1st to August 20th. Over that period, we've had 85% more fires, so almost a doubling of the total number of fires. And the deforestation numbers are jumping up, in sort of comparable terms.
3 weeks of raging fires setting off alarm bells around the world. There's so much smoke, NASA's satellites captured it from space. A cold weather system helped by changing winds, pushing smoke into cities more than 1,000 miles away.
These fires are huge. Burning an area that is bigger than the United Kingdom, the smoke is covering half of Brazil. And the thing is, the Amazon, unlike the Australian bush, isn't even supposed to burn.
So fire is completely foreign to rainforests in general, and to the Amazon rainforest in particular. So even a really low intensity fire, you could go out with your cigarette lighter and you could scorch a few trees and you'd actually kill them. And this really shocks a lot of people. But the fires that we see in the Amazon are typically just really low little fires that burn through the leaf litter. And even those little fires, 20 centimeters tall, will actually kill all the forbs, all the vines, most of the small trees, and many of the large trees. And then those fires, they then start dropping their branches and everything, and the canopy thins out and the forest gets drier. And then the next time one of these fires comes through, it tends to be far more catastrophic because there's so much more dry, flammable material on the forest floor, just ready to burn. And so the fire's intensities are around 10 times higher, they destroy the forest the second time they burn.
Okay, so these fires are bad. And while Bill says they're coming as developers push deeper and deeper into the rainforest, the Brazilian president has blamed environmental groups. So President Bolsonaro is saying, without any evidence, that not-for-profit organisations might be lighting the fires to draw attention to his government and to make him look bad.
That's a real Bolsonaro kind of statement there. And there's been some reaction to that. I don't know what he's talking about.
And you think these fires are going to get worse before they get better?
Ruby, there is, I will bet you any amount of money you want to go right now that the fires will get worse before they get better. I don't know how much cash you have in your bank account, how massive. They will get, and when we're talking here like on a monthly basis, they will absolutely get worse in September, October, and probably November before they get better, because we're heading into the driest, harshest part of the year. And always in the Amazon, we see huge numbers of fire. And we've already seen close to 40,000 fires in the Amazon this year. And that's been really, we've been in the wet months, just starting to dry out now. So absolutely.
Okay, so the Amazon is on fire and it's going to get worse.
Yeah, and that's a problem for all of us, and not just because of the carbon that's being released by these fires.
So from an environmental perspective, of course, it's the world's biggest rainforest. It plays a huge role in the global climate cycle. It stores incredible amounts of carbon in its living vegetation The destruction of that vegetation is spewing huge amounts of smoke and carbon emissions into the atmosphere, which of course promotes greenhouse gas warming and what people are increasingly referring to as a global warming crisis. But that smoke and everything else that's going on is causing more insidious changes, such as the Amazon, for instance, appears to be producing a lot of its own rainfall. It gets rainfall from the ocean and then it recycles it many times. But what's happening is when they chop the Amazon up into pieces, that recycling phenomenon is breaking down. And the great fear is that the Amazon rainforest, which is adapted for millions of years of this huge system that generates its own rainfall, that's far away from any ocean and maintaining itself, could essentially collapse from this a sharp reduction in the amount of rainfall. And we're seeing higher temperatures, just year in, month in, again and again in the Amazon, like we are in many parts of the world. But the other thing that we're seeing that I think is even scarier is very strange things happening with rainfall that we don't fully understand. And some of those things are, in fact, some of the things with rainfall I regard as perhaps the scariest things happening in the Amazon right now.
Right, so this could be the moment where the Amazon actually stops being able to generate its own rainfall.
I mean, maybe. And the implications for the rest of the world are huge because a bunch of other rain actually starts in this rainforest.
The moisture that's produced by the Amazon gets pushed up into high in the atmosphere, and then it migrates north and south. And then it comes down in places like the American Midwest, which is one of the most important agricultural areas on the planet. It comes down in southern Brazil and Argentina and in parts of South America, which are also some of the agriculturally most important areas. These are called teleconnections, which basically just imply that there's large-scale connections between these big climatic drivers and what's happening in places far away. We're playing a very dangerous game of a gambling game right now. And, the bottom line is we just don't know in a lot of cases what these consequences are going to be. But, the potential is that, for instance, you could see a dramatic loss in rainfall in some of the places that have historically been some of the most important food baskets for the planet. Not all of this is completely understood. There's definitely some of these things that are partially understood that people tried to model and project. So, it's absolutely misleading to suggest that we know exactly what's going to happen. In a sense, we're playing dice here. We're playing craps. And we are shaking the dice and we're throwing it out there. And we know we're playing a very dangerous game. We just don't know whether those things are going to come up snake eyes, in which case we're really going to be in a lot of trouble.